Welcome back to Montgomery and Company. Listen, today we are talking to community organizer and activist, but friend of the show, Nse Ufot. Thank you for joining us, Nse.
Hello, Renee.
Let's go. Let's go.
I'm so happy to be here.
Listen, okay, so congratulations on everything, by the way, since we last spoke. This is our voting episode, and we here in Atlanta, Georgia, and in just a short amount of time, we got a lot going on. We're away from Election Day, all these other things, but I know that you are having global conversations. I remember before when we talked, you connected the community to the civics. That makes sense. So I'm just curious because there's a lot of people, especially this election, that have the question of like, why should they even vote? Does their vote matter? Are both candidates not a good option? Can you just give your thoughts on those types of questions and why it does?
Yeah, I think that, so one, hi, and so thank you. And this question is so timely. One, because it's a conversation that a lot of people are having. I tend to think about voting or the vote as a tool. And it's one of the tools that we have in our tool belt to build the world that we want to live in. Full stop, right? That, from how, we don't want poop in the water that we drink, right? So having municipal leaders, right, who care about the cleanliness of the water that we drink and the air that we breathe feels really, really important. We are both based in Georgia where the minimum wage is $5.15 an hour. Right? So you can't raise a family on $5.15 an hour, even if you work full time, let alone taking care of yourself. And so that is governed by our state legislature, right? We are survivors of Hurricane Helene, and we have people in Florida who are, survived Milton. And the truth of the matter is that as the earth gets hotter and the ocean keeps boiling, that we're going to have more extreme climate events. So how we move as people, how we take care of the earth that we're in, how we fund our schools, how many hospital beds are allocated for a community, like all of that is governed by our politics. And so I believe that there's a role for everybody to play in shaping how our cities work, our counties, and our government functions, and also just building the world that we want to live in. Like they work for us. And I think that when people think that you just vote, you're hiring a representative to do a job, and then we should make sure that they're doing that job, and if not, fire them.
I love that. See, this is what I like about how you make it basic. Like a lot of people, when they think about politics, some people will say I'm not into politics, but they don't realize it's how can you not be into politics? So I like how you're breaking it down little by little. Now, us both living here in Georgia, I don't know, but it feels like every year Georgia is a big topic of discussion in politics. Why do you feel like that feels that way? Is it just because I live here now, or is there has Georgia started to become more of a conversation nationally?
No, I think, both, right? So Georgia is definitely starting to become a conversation nationally. And I think a lot of it, Georgians are more aware of their influence on national elections because of the way that our elections are conducted. What I will also say is, I think that some of it is culture too. The idea that the cradle of the civil rights movement is here, it's the home and the birthplace of Martin Luther King, et cetera. I'm an Atlanta public school graduate. So,
okay,
our first
APS.
language is right. So our first language is MLK quotes. But I think that, in terms of when you look at the fights and the sort of the way our politics and government play out, that in a lot of ways it feels like the sort of descendants of the civil rights movement and quite frankly, the descendants of the Klan, find themselves publicly fighting for power and fighting for the future of Georgia. No. I think that is, that it's a story that a lot of Americans can resonate with. Here's the other thing. I will also say that at a time where we were in the middle of a global health crisis, and many of us felt like our leaders in government had abandoned us, that we had professional athletes, like engaging in collective action, communicating that they were a part of our community, that they had opinions about what was happening, and again, took brave and bold action that sort of served as a signal and was like one of the sort of many points that was just pushing against, again, the history of Jim Crow in the South, and the history of segregation in the South, and the history of voter suppression, that there was so many examples of a multiracial coalition of people doing what they could with what they had to figure out how to take care of themselves and how to take care of each other. And so that's instructive, not just for Georgia and not just for elections, but how we do democracy
exactly
going forward.
Yeah, no, I love that. This is like, I'm trying to get the questions that I see on Twitter, and I'll get the questions that I think, because you talked about voter suppression. A lot of people don't even like understand what that term can mean. So what, like for people that are like, oh, here we go again with these types of words, voter suppression, what's a real life civics community connection to voter suppression? What is that?
Yeah. I mean, listen, you're an athlete, right? You understand that there are games and the people with the most points win, right? The team with the most points win. It's the same thing with elections. The party with the most votes, or the candidate with the most votes, wins. And when you look at not only just the history of Georgia, but the history of the United States, like who can vote and whose votes count has long been a contested part of like our government. We started a long time ago with just white male property owners, right? Like you could be white and male, but if you didn't own property, you couldn't vote. And then they expanded that just to include white men. Then they expanded it to include men. That included Black men and other men of color. And then they sort of took that back, right? And then there was more fights. And then in 1920, with the 19th Amendment, women got the right to vote, right? And then it was another like 40 years before the Civil Rights Act of 1965 was passed. And so at its core, voter suppression is putting your thumb on the scale, cheating, doing all of the things that make it difficult for another person to cast their ballot and to have that ballot counted. So what does that look like? Some people think that that's Bubba on the back of a pickup truck trying to intimidate Black voters, right? And while that certainly still happens, yes, even in the year of our Lord 2024, that what it also looks like is purges, right? Where you purge the roles that, if someone is suspected of moving, or if you didn't vote in the last election, that you can be purged from a state's voter rolls. Georgia is one of the states is very aggressive with this. And so there's that, listen, 8 hours waiting in line to vote is a suppression tactic, right? Like, I think some of us are fortunate to, be self-employed or to have understanding employers, but there's no like law that requires an employer to give you time off to vote on election day. So if you are at a precinct where in a historically Black neighborhood where the lines are crazy, 4, 5, 6 hours on your feet is a suppression tactic.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good way to break it down, because then people gonna realize, why am I standing here this long? This is a tactic. They want you to leave. By the way, keep standing in line. Now we know that Gen Z, there's a large amount of young voters that's about to activate this year. I mean, they turning 18, they coming in, they're getting information. A lot of them have never been a part of this process before. They don't really have like the passion for politics, but they also are like, hey, listen, there are some things I care about. How do people in general decipher or pick how to find information, how to understand what's misinformation, how to get the information that they need to make the choice that they make?
Right. Well, I mean, I'm going to say just media literacy is really important. A couple things. So the people who are going to be voting for the first time in this election were born in 2006.
Wow.
Right? Right? Okay, so we're going to start with that. That they were born in 2006. Easily 90% of them get their information about government, politics, elections, and the world around us online.
Yep.
And so I think that many of us in this moment should consider ourselves influencers, and influencers with the people that are in our sphere, right? The young folks that are in our lives, with the people who follow us on our pages, the people who are in community, the churches, mosques, synagogues, right? Folks who live in your neighborhood that, using your platform, using your influence to disseminate truthful information feels really, really important. I think that, we are making sure that we're collecting resources, that you send people to the candidates' websites and to the parties' websites for information. But there are also people, I would absolutely follow you. I mean, I do. One, right? But in terms of just information about what's happening with the world around us, that one, I think that Gen Z is really good at that. I would also say that there is, people use this word derogatorily, but like there is a wokeness. There's sort of a level of understanding. There's a level of inquiry and just questioning why things are the way they are. That's coming from Gen Z that I love. It challenges me. Here I am thinking that I am progressive and that my politics show up, and staff have run down on me, right? Younger staff, about the ways in which things can be different, the nature of work. They're questioning everything. Part of it is because, they're seeing millennials not retiring, not having the same job for 30 years. Again, they're seeing these once in a century, once every 1,000-year floods happening 2 or 3 times a year. And they're like, hold on now. We still got to live here. And so, while I'm not going to put the burden of saving American democracy on Gen Z, I am encouraged by the increase in their registration rates. I'm encouraged by the hard questions that they're asking and the demands that they're making. And I mean, again, just for Georgia, but we will soon see what it looks like in other states. Georgia voters and young voters in particular have been breaking records since, the first day of early voting. The first day of early voting in Georgia, over 300,000 people showed up to vote.
Crazy.
Right? That's double what we saw in 2020. We only saw like 135,000 people show up by the first day to vote in 2020. So, and that was a high water mark for us. So I love that this trend is continuing. I love the contribution that Gen Z is making. And it's making Georgia more competitive. Ain't no permanent seats. Like, everybody needs to sing for their supper.
Let's go.
And Georgia, listen, less than a decade ago, over 80% of the seats in the Georgia state legislature were uncontested. Wow. Meaning that people didn't even have another person from the other party to run against them, right? And now everything is contested. Ain't no red counties, ain't no red seats, blue seats. Like, everybody is having to run for their seat in a real way. And that's another sort of new feature that we're seeing in Georgia. And I think it's also why we keep being in the national news.
I love that. Let's get ready to rumble. Yeah, you ain't just writing your name like you want this position and then all of a sudden you got it. You talked about the internet. And I think that now with the internet, everything is more connected. We see global situations. We see global conflict. We see global war. Everything. We're seeing it now live the moment it happens. Like, Twitter is my news feed, for better or for worse. Like, that is where I get a lot of my information as well. And so with that, I know that you're traveling internationally, helping campaigns as well as domestically. What kind of conversations do you see that's similar in the politics and civics and community that's the same here in America, that's the same globally as well?
Listen, I think that Gen Z globally wants to see about their elders. And they have questions. I think that there is sort of the generational pull into the future. I think that climate is real, because what's also happening is climate is creating refugees, right? That we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina next year.
Wow. The 20th?
And
It's
the
been that
20th.
long?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And when you think about the number of people that live in Atlanta that are from New Orleans, that relocated, the people in Houston who relocated because of Hurricane Katrina, I think that that's happening in countries all over the world. You think about the Caribbean, you're in the middle of water. You're in the middle of the ocean, right? And so thinking about, what that means for immigration, but also Floridians, Californians, the wildlife, Mississippians. Mississippi has over $12 billion climate events every year. That's just one state in the United States. And then to multiply that by the number of countries, again, across the world. So the air don't respect borders. The water don't respect borders. And so the international cooperation that's required, I've been in a lot of those spaces at the intersection of politics, governments, and governing and climate. And I also think that trends about women and femmes and women's leadership, that, working in Africa, 54 countries in Africa, only a dozen have had women heads of state. Half of them were the widows of somebody who died while he was in office, right? Mexico just elected its first woman president a couple weeks ago. The United States is on the verge of electing its first woman president. And many countries around the world are looking at women's leadership as we think about how to bring half of the world's population right into the conversation, into the room.
Because that's crazy, right? We're trying to, we're not just saying this is a small margin that would be represented. We're talking about literally half of the whole population, and hearing that, not only us, which we sometimes can feel progressive as a nation, but then we ride along with everybody else with never having a woman in the most powerful position in America. It's kind of wild to think that you literally said in the year of 2024, it's kind of wild to think.
Absolutely. And we know that gender doesn't have anything to do with leadership ability, right? That we know that gender doesn't have anything to do with strength. And the ability to be strategic, right? And so, again, the fact that most of the world's countries have never had women leadership at the executive level is something that's getting addressed right now. And again, the United States is not the only place where it's happening. And that's also really exciting. I've been doing a lot of work in South Africa. And so it's also, I think that we're seeing in the US, that we're seeing globally, is the fact that history may not exactly repeat itself, but that it rhymes. So 1994, Nelson Mandela was elected as South Africa's first Black president. And so 2024, fast forward 30 years, questions about the role of the ANC, the parties, and is just having a Black face enough to, is it representative of enough progress for Black South Africans in this moment when you think about economic challenges and da-da-da-da-da? And so those are real questions that people are asking of VP Harris in this moment as well. And so the questions of identity, the questions of solidarity, and also fighting fascism, racism, and genocide. That the world has been in this place before. And so I think that we all would benefit from learning our lessons from the past.
Definitely. I like that you said it may not repeat, but it rhymes. That's lit. Question. So we talked about the 8 hours that you might have to stand in line. And yes, you should stand in line. But if they are standing in line, what's a survival kit? What should they bring? What should they need on that day of voting?
Listen, snacks, water. But here's what you should do is vote early. Right. So because they have yet to take that right away from us, not for lack of trying though, Georgians have, and people all across the country have the ability to vote early. And so if there is a way for you to mail in your ballot or drop your ballot off at a drop box or hand it in to a county board of elections official before election day, we're encouraging folks to do that. Those ballots get counted first. It makes you available to do things on election day. But you can also have that peace of mind knowing that while we continue to do other things to try to build the world we want to live in, at the very least, you know that your vote has been cast. And so we're encouraging people to vote early. But if you find yourself voting on election day, definitely bring some snacks, definitely bring some water. You can also bring a stadium chair for any sports parents out here.
I know we got some listening. I know we got some sports parents listening right now.
Absolutely. Bring a stadium chair. But we're hoping that is not what is required in order to show up and do your civic duty this year. But yeah, early voting is definitely going to help with that.
All right, so my last question, first comment, amazing what you do. Like, I'm serious. Like, we've talked to you before when you was turning up CEO of the New Georgia Project, did record numbers, did record things, and then went on to internationally do the same thing. So first of all, shouts to you, because how we connect this conversation to real life, I think, is what's going to get people engaged. When you hear the word politics, automatically certain people's ears cut off. There's commercials on TV, there's ads on the radio, and almost sometimes it can feel like people just want to just mute out the noise. Is there a way to keep your peace, but also still be engaged? Because there's a group that like, yeah, I'm registered to vote. I just don't want to hear about it all the time. Is there a way to do both? Basically, you know, can we get you a girl that can do both? Is there a way to do both?
100%. And for me, it is organization, right? It's solidarity is our superpower. A lot of times, listen, in America, we love our superhero narratives. We love our Messiah narratives, right? Like this one person who did this heroic thing and like changed the course of history. And I'm not knocking that, right? But when we think about like the long arc of the moral universe, individuals get tired. Yeah. Individuals, they put targets on individuals' backs and can get individuals up out of the paint. That our strength and our safety and our strategy and protection come in numbers, right? I think about, okay, not to play old records, but it's still relevant and it's still a bop. Think about the 2020 Dream Team.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Imagine the target on one's back if it was just one person that was like, hey, our boss is running for an office, but we believe that her opponent is the best person for America in this moment. They would have fried you as an individual. Facts. Right? But the collective, right? Taking action, being bold together, like that's going to have to happen over and over and over again. So I know that there are things that people care about. There are things that you can't stand to see happen and you want to see them change. Or there's a thing that you want for yourself or your family or your community that you care very deeply about it and you're willing to put feet in streets or volunteer or put some in the collection plate. That it is solidarity is our superpower, right? That everybody ain't got to do all the things all the time. That you do what you can, when you can, with what you have, and with your people who share your values. And that's how we move the ball forward. That's how we make forward progress. And that's how you do both, right? Because I subscribe to the Georgia Mass Choir. I'm a PK, right?
Okay.
So the Georgia Mass Choir theory of organizing, which is, listen, everybody is holding their individual note, right? So that one person needs to drop out because of, I can't make choir rehearsal because of competing personal or professional obligations. You know that there's still going to be choir rehearsal. And you know that the altos, the tenors, right, and the sopranos are going to be all doing their part. So if me and my little, I don't even know what I am. Like, I was like, contralto. That feels like a real word.
Oh, no.
Right. It's giving Macy Gray on a
Oh,
bad day.
I can see that though. A little raspy.
On a bad day, though. Like Macy Gray on a bad day after hookah in Atlanta.
Okay. Now you talking ATL. Now you talking. You got the green background. We know that background. That's very ATL of you. Okay.
All I need is some lamb chops and a Hennessy margarita.
And you got the whole starter pack.
Welcome to ATL.
Let's go. No, I love that. Okay, Nse, I love how you break it down. Before you go, we want to play a little game, have a little fun, 60-second shot clock, quick questions, quick hitters. You ready to do a little something?
Okay. All right.
All right, we got 60 on the clock. Yep. All right.
Okay.
So, Nse, what's a sport you can play really well?
Ooh, water polo.
Excuse me? What's a sport that you're really bad at?
Ooh, golf.
Feel you. Same. If you could have one sports superpower, what would it be?
One sports superpower?
Yep.
Oh, I want like the wettest J's of all time. Like, I want like no miss jumpers. Like,
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a good one. I like that. All right. If you could brag about beating one athlete at any sport, what would it be? Or who would it be? Who would that athlete be?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it would have to be real. And elite athletes, let me think.
Who would you,
Beating
if you had your
Usain Bolt.
superpower, remember you got your, okay. Oh, I heard that. Did you see
Oh,
this?
you know what? I want like 3-point shooting competition with my never miss a jumper superpower. Me and Steph Curry. Let's go.
Okay. Because if you got a wetter jumper than Steph Curry, I mean, night. Okay.
Right. Let's go.
What would be, this is your last question. What would be your walkout theme song?
Oh.
Why you start?
Listen, because I'm from Atlanta and my options are ratchet and ratcheter. But I really feel this way. Bone crusher.
Oh.
Never scared.
I ain't never scared. What? I ain't never. Oh, yes. Listen, I love that. All right. Thank you so much for joining us here at MoCo. Please, y'all, if y'all love the conversation, see people breaking it down, make sure to follow Nse at THE, the Nse Ufot. And I'm going to spell it out just so y'all know. THENSE UFOT. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Come on, man. Follow her on IG. Say what's up. And y'all stay tuned for more Montgomery and Company.
WABE.